Hey, today I will be testing the Witcher 3 next gen update on my fairly recent to build system. But before I talk about the specs of my system, let me just say how beautiful this game looks. CD Projekt Red really has the Red engine firing on all cylinders with this one. Just look at this. Although this was released way back in 2015, this next gen update released in December 2022 really enhances the visual fidelity to another level. They have added ray tracing support with it, improved textures, enhanced lightings, making this already beautiful game into a stunning, gorgeous looking fantasy world. Of course, this game is much more than a graphical showcase. However, today we'll be mostly focusing on the visuals as I will be running it on my RX 9070 paired with the Ryzen 7 7700. I have my 7700 overclocked by about 200 MHz and undervolted using curve optimizer by a magnitude of minus 30 in the BIOS. My 1970 is the Gigabyte Gaming OC version, which I have kept it at its stock settings, although it comes with a little bit of factory overclock. I also have 32 gigs of system RAM running at 6000 megatransfers per second and CL30 timing. Well, if you're interested in the build video of my system, you can check out the link in the description below. I will be playing the DirectX 12 version of this game. Now, let's see how this system performs with the Witcher 3 next gen update. Well, I'll be starting at 1080p resolution. The frame rate is uncapped. I'll be keeping ray tracing disabled for now. As for the anti-aliasing, I'm using TAAU for native rendering, as this game does not allow using FSR as a native anti-aliasing option without using the upscaling part. Rest of the settings are at their maximum values. I have also enabled NVIDIA hairworks at its maximum possible value as well. A quick disclaimer though, there will be a lot of screen tearing, and I do apologize for that. I have my capture card recording at 60 frames per second, and there seems to be some frame pacing issue I can't quite figure out at the moment. Alright, looks like we started at around 120 FPS in this particular scene, and it kind of drops a little bit as I approach those foliage, dropping to 104. Well, it looks like it will remain above 100 FPS most of the time. And as you can tell, this is an extremely smooth experience. The frame time graph is absolutely flat, no stutters whatsoever. The 9070 is performing excellent in this title at these settings. And as I move away from the more graphically intensive foliage dense areas, it looks like the frame rate is increasing to more than 120 frames per second. Also, the GPU is at 100% workload. Although GPUs with the performance tier of the 9070 are considered mid-range nowadays, which is absolutely crazy. But this card is no slouch, and the GPU, being fully utilized at 1080p also indicates how good the Ryzen 7 7700 is. So I'm really interested to check the performance inside of a city with all NPCs around, and see if the 7700 actually holds up. Well, inside of a city, the frame rate is about the same 115 to 120 fps. The GPU usage is at 99% now, but for a fraction of a second I did see it drop to 95%, indicating maybe it's taking a little bit of toll on the 7700. But look at the frequency of of the 9070. It's surpassing 3000 megahertz. Well, it's really a great experience at 1080p native resolution at maximum settings, averaging at around 117 fps. So let's check out ray tracing next. There you go, ray tracing turned on, and our FPS gets reduced to half of what we're getting around 58, 59, close to 60. That's a huge hit to performance. Of course, there is improvement in visuals. I will have a comparison of RT and non-RT scenes towards the end of this video. However, the hit in frame rate is absolutely massive while using ray tracing. I know it is demanding on the hardware, but still, I believe it's a matter of perspective, but I don't really think I will be missing out too much of an experience while playing without using ray tracing, especially when I get to enjoy those high FPS numbers with ray tracing turned off, and the game looks quite good without using RT as well. But that of course is my personal opinion. So getting close to 60 FPS inside this city area, averaging at 59. I think I saw an RTX 5070 delivering similar performance to these settings. These two cards almost deliver similar ray tracing performance. The 5070 excels in path tracing though, and the 9070 beats the 5070 in raster by about 13%. However, the 9070 has 4 gigs of extra VRAM, which became the deciding factor for me over the 5070. So let's get outside, getting mid 60s. You can see RT is turned on as the reflections in the water can be seen even when the objects being reflected are not in the scene. So let's run around a little bit. Stays in the low 60s. I'm pretty sure the FPS will drop below 60 as we enter a foliage dense area. This game does look really good with ray tracing. It's only the hit in performance, which I don't think justifies the upgrade in visual we get most of the time using ray tracing. Those foliage in the distance looks ominous to performance, so let's get in there. There it's dropping to 53, 52. I think will not drop below 50. So averaging at around 60, native 1080p, max settings, max RT. Let's try some upscaling. FSR 2 at quality. Unfortunately, this game does not support FSR 4 yet. AMD is surely taking their time with that one. I can of course use OptiScaler, but that would be a video for another day. Now using FSR 2, I can see a lot of shimmering, some noise. Of course, this is 1080p. Lots of noise around those foliage and grass. This portion is one of the most intensive area in the game, and it is able to maintain 60 fps in most of the time. So you can expect in most areas these settings will deliver you 60 plus fps most of the time. So averaging 64 using FSR 2 on quality at 1080p max settings with ray tracing. I think that's enough 1080p testing for now. Let's move on to 1440p. So at 1440p resolution, we're once again starting with ray tracing turned off and everything else at max settings. Getting around 82, 81 frames per second. Let's get inside those dense forest area. Looks like we're getting around 73, 74-ish frames per second. Doesn't look like we will be dropping below 70. But there are some creatures I don't really wish to engage, so let's get out of here. Thankfully, they were kind enough to give me enough time to benchmark the performance in that intensive area of the map. And as soon as I get out of that intensive area, the performance shoots up. In this open region, we're really getting excellent performance, crossing 90 frames per second. 80s, wow, we have crossed around 100 frames per second. And mind you, this is 1440p native max settings without RT, and the 9070 is really performing well here. The frame time graph is absolutely smooth, no stutter whatsoever. And inside of a city, it's the same story as before. The performance remains more or less the same. The RAM usage is more than 14 gigs. Interesting. It suddenly reminded me of the crazy RAM prices that we're witnessing currently. Some of the kits have, tripled in price. I hope that gets addressed soon enough. Well, there should be no issue to play this game at 1440p native max settings without RT using this configuration. Averaging at around 86 frames per second. So let's try out some ray tracing. Let's turn it on, and as expected, the FPS tanks to around 45. I really want this technology to improve and get optimized so that we can enjoy ray traced visuals without such a massive hit to performance. And with every generation of GPUs, we are improving, gradually getting there, but still a long way to go, I believe. At the moment, RT is more of a nice to have feature, unless of course you are having a top tier GPU like the RTX 5080 or something. The only option that you have to get decent performance using ray tracing is to use upscaling, which is of course not a bad thing, but the hit in performance is irrespective of whether you are using upscaling or not. I know every time ray tracing pops up, I just start complaining about it, but I'm not against the technology. It's just concerning that some games have already started making RT mandatory and can't be turned off. However, going by the Steam hardware survey, the hardware that most gamers have in their systems are not yet ready for such a compulsion. The improvement in the technology and its implementation is not going at a complementary pace, which is what I believe. I know most people will not share my opinion on this one, and I would really love to hear your thoughts on the topic. So, do let me know in the comments below. So, got a little bit distracted. Let's get back into the game. Getting around 45 frames per second on average. Pretty sure it will drop once we get into the forest area, which is very intensive in this game. It does look really good when using ray tracing. Let's get inside those forests. There, dropping to the 30s, 34, 33 is the lowest number that I could notice. I don't think it will drop below 30, but mind you, it is 1440p native resolution, max settings, max RT. So let's turn on some FSR 2. God, I really wish this game gets FSR 4 support sooner than later. There we go, FSR 2 at quality. And we're barely hitting the 60 FPS mark. And we're once again approaching one of the most demanding part of the game. The shimmering is much more tolerable even though it's FSR 2. Some of you may still find it distracting. But I think at 1440p FSR 2 quality is pretty usable in this game. However, I would not go below quality level of upscaling. This is why I believe we are missing out on FSR 4 the most. Because even at balance level, FSR 4, the image quality is a lot better than quality level using FSR 2. So getting around 50 frames per second in this dense forest area. As we go outside, we are jumping between 60 to low 50. Not the best performance, but not the worst either, considering this is 1440p max settings with maximum RT at quality FSR 2. And we are averaging at around 55 frames per second. There is also Intel XeSS as an upscaling option, which I did not test at 1080p since even FSR 2 was pretty rough when it comes to image quality at 1080p. But at 1440p, let's enable XeSS at quality settings and see how things go.
Come on now.
Well, the performance is more or less the same, but the grass looks a little bit noisier. I don't know if you can see it over the YouTube's compression, but there is a lot of shimmering. I don't know, guys. If I have to use upscaling and don't have access to DLSS, I would stick to FSR 2 in this game. The performance is similar to FSR 2 at quality settings. It's only the visuals. It looks like a noise filter, slight noise filter has been applied all over the image. Anyways, I think it's enough for 1440p testing. Let's try out some 4K. Alright, we're at 4K now. At maximum settings, ray tracing turned off. And at this point my cheapest capture card is really struggling to keep up. Although I set up my recording to 60 FPS, in reality almost half the frames are duplicates in this recorded video. So technically the video is being captured at only 30 to 35 frames per second, and hence the terrible screen tearing. I do apologize for the quality of the video. Moving on to the benchmark, this card is not exactly a 4K native card. Very few cards are for that matter. So not surprisingly, we're getting around 45 frames per second on average at 4K native max settings, which is actually not bad now that I think of it. The VRAM usage is around 11 gigs, So 12 GB GPUs should be able to run this game at 4K max settings. Although the number is getting too close for comfort to the 12 GB mark, so having a 16 GB card really gives some headroom and a little bit of peace of mind, to be honest. Okay, so 4K native averaging at around 44 FPS. Let's try out some upscaling. There you go, FSR 2 at quality. Now I will only be testing FSR 2 because as we already saw that the picture quality of FSR in this title is better than XeSS and both deliver similar performance. So if I need to use upscaling, I'll be using FSR. Now FSR 2 at quality is delivering more than 60 FPS most of the time. In some of the foliage intensive scene or in dense forests, it will definitely drop below 60. But most of the time we should stay above 60 FPS. Also FSR 2 at quality looks pretty decent at 4K since it has got more pixels to work with, and honestly I cannot spot too many noise or shimmering as we were noticing at lower resolutions. So if you want to play at 4K max settings with this card, FSR 2 at quality is the setting that I would use to stay at around 60 FPS most of the time.
Slow now. Whoa.
Okay, just for the sake of benchmarking, I'm going to enable ray tracing at 4K native first and watch my card suffer.
Come on.
21 frames per second, not even cinematic frame rate. Of course, this performance is not surprising. This is 4K max settings at max RT. Will break most cards, so no point in extending my card suffering any further. Let's enable upscaling and see how much things improve. FSR 2 at quality allows us to surpass the 30 FPS mark. Looks like it doesn't drop from 30 even with all these trees around. So it's still maintaining the 30 plus frames per second. We should be getting 30 plus FPS all of the time with these settings. There was a time when this was considered a playable experience. Some games are still locked at 30 FPS on consoles. You can play using a controller if you want to. Well, let's try out some FSR 2 at balance settings. Not much increase in performance, still around 35 frames per second. This is a pretty demanding area though. I'm pretty sure using quality upscaling we would have dropped below 30 in this area. The picture quality actually looks pretty good, even at FSR 2 at balanced settings. But I would not go below balanced, even at 4K with FSR 2. So once we're outside the dense area, we're hitting 40 FPS. AMD really needs to increase the number of titles available under FSR 4. Not only the new titles, but also, you know, the popular older titles like this one. It has been quite some time that FSR 4 is out, and it's really a shame that this game does not yet support FSR 4. Well, inside of the city is the same story. The performance is similar. We're getting around an average of 45 frames per second. So that's 4K FSR 2 at balanced, maximum settings at maximum RT with the RX 9070 and Ryzen 7 7700. So next, let's move ahead and test some comparison between RT and non-RT scenes.
damn deer have stripped the bark off the trees again.
Meaning?
Start a rumour that your father's in.
How do you make a living? We've no monsters.
It'll take some coin to spread that round.
All our grain.
Alright guys, that's it for this one I guess. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, do drop a thumbs up. Let me know your thoughts in the comments and maybe consider subscribing the channel. See you in the next one. Cheers.